Hey everybody, this is James from TeaDB. Hope you guys are all drinking some amazing teas today. Today I have another solo Inbetweenisode. I'm going to continue on the trend that I've been doing of reviewing just kind of teas on my own, giving them a rating. So today we have a raw Pu'erh tea. This is the 2002 Tailian International Expo tea. There's two, they're both sold on Yunnan Sourcing, and I associate them together a lot. This is the one that has a globe on it. I think the other one may have been for a different event. I'm not really sure, but it's a dry stored, a Kunming stored tea, and it is now 16 years old, so that's getting pretty old. It was made for a special event, and we are going to have a go of it. So I've had this tea. I do not own this tea, but I've had it probably, I've had maybe 3 samples of it. And I have to apologize to Darius, who of course you can read over at Badger and Blade, releasing a lot of tea notes and whatnot. He sent me this, and he sent me 10 grams and with the intention of me bringing it onto the show, and I drank the entire sample. So this sample has been sent to me by another tea friend. Thank you. I don't believe they wish to be credited. I hope I got that right. So I'm not going to mention their name, but thank you very much to that person for sending me this sample. I am looking forward to trying this tea again. And this tends to be a little bit out of my normal wheelhouse of what I drink for raw Pu'erh. I tend to gravitate more towards a lot of stuff stored in Taiwan, or even traditionally stored, which is fairly different, and teas that tend to be from Yiwu and Munghai County. So this tea, while it's a blend, it is from areas north of Xishuangbanna. Alright, so I have steep number 5 and 6 right here. So from my view, and my view of color isn't always great, it's brewing up sort of a yellow-orange color here. Gonna take a smell of the leaves. So at this point, and this is 6 infusions in, keep in mind, the leaves are really floral, they're fairly verdant. It's not a terribly complex aroma, but I will note that during the first couple infusions, the tea started out to be have fairly pungent smoke to it. After a couple steeps, that went away completely, and it had sharper floral notes in the aroma, and it's a bit softer and not as intense in its aromatics right now, and that's fine. That's pretty normal of the tea, so it's more of a standard floral aroma right now. And yeah, let's not let this tea cool down too much and get drinking. It's kind of soft and buttery in its mouthfeel, and then you can sort of really taste the strength of the tea. It kind of has a pretty pungent bitterness to it. That's also greener, because this tea has been dry stored in a place that's not particularly humid at all. Kunming, the tea still has a lot of high notes. For something that is 16 years old. You can also sort of tell by the color that this isn't brewing up a deeper, darker shade. And so then you sort of get hit by that bitterness. That's been true throughout. It was even stronger earlier. There's no smoke in the taste. And I'd say the taste is mainly sort of floral, maybe a little bit nutty. And then eventually, maybe like 30 seconds now, I'm starting to really taste the sweetness of the tea. Let's see how this does in terms of depth as well. I'd say it's sort of medium on the scale of softness. It's not too rough when you first take a sip, but it's not, you can definitely also tell it's dry stored. This tea, I will note, has a very nice aftertaste that's lingering in the throat. It doesn't hit you as immediately or as quickly as a tea from, I don't know, Munghai County necessarily would, but it's definitely there. So take a sip, let it sit there for a second, and then sort of evaluate what you're tasting in your mouth. So I have a lot of like floralness lingering. It's pretty deep in some sense. It's in the throat, so that is pretty pleasant. I should also note that this tea, if you look at Yunnan Sourcing's description, it's described as being from a whole bunch of areas, so it's definitely a blend. I can't say that I'm sharp enough to say that I know exactly where this blend is from, other than it does taste like has a lot of northern components to it. These blends can also definitely help to sort of create a unique taste and a more layered taste that ages well, rather than something that might become very singular with age, if you were to age, for example, to the most extreme end, a tea from one tree. And I'll also note that I'm using slightly different parameters. I am finishing off the sample, so I'm using 5.5 grams, and this teapot's about 95 milliliters. So that's a little bit less, so I've had to compensate for a bit by using a little bit longer steep times. I'm, of course, using boiling water, as I always do. So this tea, this steep, I tried to push it just a little bit more. The shade is more on, it's a little bit darker than the previous one. It's a little bit more on the orange end. It's thicker, a little bit more oily, but it's actually, the tea has softened up a little bit, so it has that sort of pungent bitterness that I was talking about before, but it's not as extreme. So in fact, I'm enjoying this infusion a bit more. Maybe a hint of stone fruits. I'd say it's still mainly on the sort of more vegetal floral end of things, rather than being like a very stone fruity tea. It really does have quite a full range of notes. This tea is 16 years old. It has a lot of floral notes, so that should tell you a little bit about sort of how it originally was, and just the fact that it was pretty dry stored. So I feel like you can really taste the original character of the material here. And so pretty smooth, sort of in that buttery, oily mouthfeel wise. Very pleasant tea overall, I would say. I enjoy drinking it. I could not see this tea ever becoming sort of a daily tea for me, and I think a lot of that speaks more to my style of the tea. This tea is definitely a pretty good quality tea, and so keeping that in mind, I'm going to give it a 6.3 rating. It has definitely some positive attributes that stand out in press, but I don't know if it's totally towards my style. If I were to restrict myself or grade this more on a scale of just northern teas, which tend to not be what I drink, I think I'd grade it quite a bit higher, maybe even as high as 8, just because I really do think this is one of the best northern aged teas that I have tasted. And I think it's actually quite interesting to try for me, because I just drink Kunming stored teas so seldomly. And I don't necessarily subscribe to the belief that Kunming storage is terrible. It just is quite slow for the tea. So you would taste a far more dramatic evolution of the tea if this tea was Taiwan or Hong Kong stored, even if it was Taiwan or Hong Kong stored and relatively dryly. I think that just about concludes this review. This tea, I think, is probably worth sampling if you have the money for it. It used to sell for a lot less. I think it's well into the hundreds now, $150, $160 on Yunnan Sourcing for a large cake. And I can tell that this tea is definitely going to go for probably 4 or 5 more solid infusions. Let me know how you guys like this review. If you want to see more reviews like this, please subscribe below. Hit that thumbs up button as well. Trying a lot to bring more teas that are accessible to the Western audience onto the show. And and thank you very much to Darius, as well as the person who sent me this sample. And I will see you guys next time. Cheers.